All righty. I got an email from Jeff. Won't give his last name. But he says, "Hi, guys. In the mid 1980s, I only saw WTBS shows when I visited a friend's place who had cable television. Before I was invited over, my friend said on more than one occasion, Bobby Eaton would go up to the top for the Alabama Jam and adjust the setting of the Techwood Drive studio lights before coming off the top. Was the light legitimately in the way, or was Bobby just making it a trademark spot?"
Is this Reggie's Corner?
No, I've actually had multiple people ask me about this and talk about this, and for such a stupid thing, well, not stupid, but for such a just a spur of the moment thing that he did a few times, people love it. I used to have people at the Fan Fest coming up and say, "Oh, I remember when Bobby used to move the lights." And I wanted to explain it to Jeff here because he says, "For the record, I never actually saw this occur despite being able to watch the NWA more often." And he is thinking his friend lied to him, saying, "Please confirm if this story is legitimate." And what happened, and you remember seeing that a couple of times, right, Brian, on the tapes from the Techwood Drive studio?
Yeah, of course.
But basically what it was, this was a television studio. It was not built to be a wrestling arena. It's a TV studio that and at the time, people think, oh, TBS. Well, this was still in the days of WTBS. They'd been a super station for fucking 9 years at this point, 8 years, whatever. And they're still at the Techwood Drive location. And it's a TV studio that you see with the local stations do news from, or the cooking show, or Grandpa Munster did Super Scary Saturday, his creature feature movie from there, right? And that's why you could only get 2 rows of seats on on the back side and 2 rows of seats on the left side. The right side was a curtain because that was the edge of the studio, and you went down the hallway and you were out of it. And where the announcers were, that was pretty much the other edge of the studio, right? So the lights overhead were arranged on a grid apparatus, and some were hung from the ceiling, but there was space in the middle where you could put the ring and the guys could still do all the shit they needed to do, right? I don't know about today where there would be no ladder matches in the studio. The ceiling was 15 feet high or whatever. But every once in a while, they would set the ring up for whatever reason. And sometimes Teddy Long, I think this was before Teddy was part of the crew, so I can't blame him. But they would set the ring up like 2 feet to the right or whatever than they normally do. And suddenly Bobby, one day, he's climbing to the top rope that he always goes to. And yet he almost always went to the same corner because you couldn't come out of the babyface's corner. And you didn't want to come out of the heel corner or the other one because that was your back is to the main camera. So by process of elimination, he always goes the same corner. He goes up there, and as he's standing up, there's one of those goddamn giant lights right in front of him, right where his head would be. So he realizes it, and without missing anything, he reaches up and just moves it over to the side and still does knee or whatever he's going to do off the top anyway. And I made mention of it. I said, "You're going to have to raise the lights up because nobody can fly as high as Bobby Eaton." And it was such a cool visual, him doing that he was all the way up in the ceiling, that people remembered it. And then it happened like 2 or 3 other times, I think, maybe. But we referred to it more often than that. But every once in a while, they'd set the fucking thing up 2 feet farther over, and he'd have to move some shit around. And it was cool as shit to look at.
When was the first time you saw a wrestler hit the lights?
I saw Ricky Gibson because he used to take that insane backdrop. I've never seen anybody else do it, not only for height, but just the complete form. He would, if he got a guy that could really boost him, Dennis Condrey gave him excellent ones, he would come in for the backdrop, and as Dennis would stand up, Ricky Gibson would have his hands on Dennis's shoulders, and he would go straight up in the air where his head was all the way up as far as it could go. And then he would flip forward, and Ricky Gibson's head would be above the guy giving him the backdrop. And then his feet would be straight up in the air. And then somehow between there and the ground, he would land flat as a board. And it made an incredible sound because that was the squarest 230 pounds coming down as flat as possible. And he kicked the lights a couple times at spot shows, and I think the old building in Jonesboro. But I tell you, Sputnik Monroe used to fucking win money on that bet, or at least did once in Shreveport. I told you that story.
Well, kicking out the lights?
Yeah, well, not kicking them out, but just kicking it. There was the old upside down wash tub in the Memorial Auditorium there in Shreveport. And Sputnik had the guys in the locker room, all the heels bet that he could take the highest backdrop. He'd give $20 or whatever to whoever could kick the goddamn lights above the ring. And everybody all night tried to take a backdrop and kick the lights and couldn't. And he was the main event, but the intermission beforehand, he went to the maintenance guy at the auditorium that raised and lowered these lights and the curtains and all that thing. And he had them jack the fucking lights down 5 feet. And then he went out there and kicked them. Anyway,